I'm Jessie Mahoney, and I do mindful coaching to help people move forward in life with a little more ease and grace and buoyancy is what I like to refer to it as. And I've been doing these curious about coaching sessions, one, because I think they're really fun. And I enjoy meeting different folks and sharing coaching with people who either haven't experienced it or maybe they haven't experienced my style of coaching, which is a little bit different. And I also hope that just in coming for a short session, you get a few tips that you can take with you so something is better. And for those of you, none of you were at the last session, and I encourage you, if you you can go and listen to it. And I gave a kind of lengthy discussion of the importance of blending mindfulness and coaching and why upregulating your parasympathetic nervous system and being calm is really important to being able to change your mindset. And so most of us are always going, and in that sympathomimetic busy storm, releasing cortisol. And that is not fantastic for changing our perspective and shifting our approach to things long-term and having it stick. Many of us are pretty good at doing it short-term, but it doesn't stick. And so what I have found through my work is that when you really work on your nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system, which mindfulness helps you do, the coaching work works much, much better. And so that is why I blend the mindfulness with the coaching, and I refer to them as synergistic. So all of you are physicians, so you know what that means. And so I always encourage people to practice some kind of mindfulness, although I am very flexible about what that looks like. So for some people, it's headspace for 5 minutes. For some people, it's yoga. For some people, it's 45 minutes of, MBSR type meditation. What I really want is for you to find ways that you can calm your nervous system, because when you calm your nervous system, we're much more able to make shifts. The other thing that I think is a key piece of the coaching that is also tied to mindfulness is, I call it self-compassion, but really being kind to yourself. And it's a key component of mindfulness. And most of us who are high achievers and have become physicians are not that kind to ourselves. And so when we are busy beating ourselves up and in shame, blame, guilt, and self-doubt, again, the mind shifts don't happen as well. So we're releasing shame, we're releasing cortisol and norepinephrine again, which impacts our amygdala, and we don't learn and grow in the same way. And that's sort of shorthand. So if you want to learn more about this, I talked about it last time, but it is relevant to what I'm going to talk about tonight. So I just wanted to sort of throw that in there as well. And then the last piece that I consider a prerequisite is not being depleted. And most of you are completely depleted, exhausted, and overwhelmed. And it's also very hard for us to shift our mindset when we're in that state, because it's also kind of a sympathomimetic threatened state. And so our mind doesn't want to shift. And so sometimes people say, well, I did all this coaching, it didn't work. And when we are completely depleted, it doesn't work as well. And so my invitation is to work on repleting yourself. And that is where the tonight's topic came from, because someone said to me, but I have no time to replete myself. And so how do I do this? And, repletion can come from the mindfulness, which takes very little time. And once you have a practice, it can be 3 minutes twice a day, and you'll get benefit even from that. But a lot of it is in not doing things that are very expensive and continuing to deplete us. And so what I thought would be fun for tonight's conversation, because I like to have some introductory topic, and then I'm happy to do some coaching if people want to get coached on something. But this idea that a lot of the things that we do and the things that we coach on are very depleting. And so we have these negative, unhelpful thought patterns, and they actually make us tired because they drain our energy. And so being really clear, a lot of people think we need time management strategies. We need to be more efficient. And then we also need to rest plenty, which we do. I always say the more we do, the more we need to rest. And that's a very different concept than we have been taught. But when we can't do that, we can actually plug those energy leaks, and that gives us a whole ton of energy back. And so that I think is an underutilized strategy. Now, I am a huge fan of retreats, and I run retreats, and they are designed to replete you. So it isn't that you don't need repletion, and it isn't that this isn't in place of doing healthy things that you should do to take care of yourself. But if you can identify these energy leaks and these drains that are just constantly draining you, that actually gives you tons of energy. And I hear that from people all the time in their coaching. They come back and they say, wow, I just feel so much lighter and so much more free. And then that's where like the clarity comes. And so when we're exhausted, we really can't see because we're in that threatened spot. And so my invitation tonight is to look for the places where you're leaking energy. And I'm going to give you a bunch of ideas. I did this myself recently, and I've worked with a number of clients on it. And it's a lot of these same thoughts that if you listen to the last session, I call them expensive thoughts and expensive habits and ways of thinking about things. And so they are default thought patterns that most of us have as women. And then high achievers have more of them. And then people who went into medicine have more of them because they were kind of trained into us during the training process. And so one of the things that really drains your energy is resisting reality. And so we tend to want things to be different, and maybe they should be different. For example, thinking that medicine should be different than it is right now. And so my thought would be, it should be, by the way, but when we're resisting that reality, it's very expensive. And when we're resisting it all day, it's very expensive. And so allowing it to be as it is, and maybe your child to be as they are, or your spouse to be as they are, or your parents to be as they are, gives you back space and energy. And it doesn't mean that you don't try to change things. I often say you can wish things were different, and still make a difference. And when you focus on that difference that you're wanting to make, all of a sudden, all the new ideas come. And that's sort of a way that coaching opens up the world and opens up different ways of approaching things, helps you get unstuck. And I'm going to say untired, because being stuck, it's actually not on my list, but I should have put it on my list. Like thinking we're stuck, feeling stuck, that drains your energy. It's like a whole bunch of energy leaks that just keep draining out. And we're tired all the time. And then we say, I'm tired and overwhelmed all the time. So the next one that I have a list, I don't know, 10 or 12, and there's plenty more. These are just the ones on my list. And I still, even with coaching, do them, but I see them. And now I'm like, oh, look, draining my energy, resisting reality. Or the other one is resisting the emotions you have. This came up last night, actually, in my ongoing presence group. And someone was angry about something and upset about something, and she didn't want to be. And what I would say is actually allowing yourself to have all those human emotions and just saying, wow, I'm really angry about something. And that's okay. And so when we try to make that go away too fast, we actually burn up energy and we're much more tired. And so there are tools to allow you to allow the anger. And when you allow it, it usually just fizzles and goes away. When we resist it and we think that, oh, a better human wouldn't be angry, it doesn't mean, by the way, that you have to yell and react and do all the things. There are some tools, especially within mindfulness, around sitting with feelings and allowing them to be. And so that's another reason that when you blend mindfulness and coaching, it works so, so well. We all tend to try to control things outside our control, a huge energy suck. And so in coaching, I often have people really think about, okay, well, what's in your control and what's not? And if it's out of your control, let it go. Because so much of our energy is spent trying to control things and people and systems. And for those of you working in medicine, like things in the clinic that are completely out of your control. And so when we let go of that, we have so much more energy and so much more space to focus on what is in our control and actually make a shift there. Thinking there's a right answer, and this is something we were trained, right? There's a right and wrong. And so then if there's a right answer, there's also a wrong way of doing it. And we spend a lot of energy not softening to the idea that there are many ways to do it. We also tend to have tremendous fear about mistakes, and that is very expensive, right? If I make a mistake, something terrible will happen. And so we get into this anxiety about having to find the right answer, and that drains our energy. And so the idea is once you can start to see these thought patterns, even just seeing them, you're like, wow, I'm expending all this energy thinking there's a right decision. I did some coaching earlier this week for someone who was trying to make a big decision, and they get stuck in there's a right decision or wrong decision. And what if they're both good decisions? And so there's a lot of softening to this idea that there isn't a right and wrong way that allows you to think differently. And so as soon as you see our attachment to that, which we were very much trained to think that way in medicine, and sometimes in medicine that's true, there's a right way and a wrong way, but there's actually usually 7 right ways to handle a certain thing. And so when we can begin to soften to that, especially when it comes to our children and maybe decisions that we're helping them make, or decisions about perhaps having a child or leaving a spouse, these things, or leaving a job, like people get really stuck in that. And so detaching from that idea is super helpful. We also tend to ruminate about things and just spin and spin and spin. That is very expensive. And that comes from this idea of right and wrong. It also comes from anxiety about a bad outcome, catastrophizing. It comes from this idea that if we make a mistake, something terrible will happen. It comes from something that I call over responsibility, where we take responsibility for things that are out of our control. And it comes from also this deep sense of self-doubt that was very much trained into us. And I always like to say with all of these, I think most people who come to these sessions, they're like, wow, I have all of those. And I just say it's not your fault. Like society put these thoughts in our head, and medicine sealed the deal. And being a high achieving woman also helped them kind of seal in. And so just knowing and seeing them, all of a sudden you get your control and your agency back, and it's magical. So some other things are the urgency tax, I call it. It's incredibly draining. We think everything is urgent, including with our children, including with our spouse, including with decisions being made at work. And, I don't know, I know what kind of doctor some of you are, but for ER docs or ICU docs, like they are trained in this urgency mindset. And so they come home and the decision about their child's homework is urgent, and the dinner situation is urgent, and the travel situation is urgent. And so that I call it the urgency tax. But because tonight we're talking about exhaustion and overwhelm, like it also creates fatigue and overwhelm, which is, again, an energy drain. And so a lot of this is just noticing how these patterns, another one that I mentioned last night, and Anna, I think you were there last night, was toxic independence, and thinking that, so I call it toxic because we are all these strong, independent women. We do things ourselves. We're really good at them. And then no one else can do them as well. So we have to keep doing them. And then we're mad at everyone else for not doing their fair share. Very, very expensive emotionally. So things that are, and I always use this word expensive in coaching, because when things are expensive emotionally, they are exhausting, energy drains. And so there's a whole bunch more, but I think that just gives you an idea of why seeing these thought patterns begins to shift the way you approach life. And so I would encourage you all to make a list of how you drain your energy, what things drain your energy. They may be thought patterns. They may also be things that you do. Another thing that is not a thought pattern, but we do a lot of coaching on, is called buffering. Buffering is shopping, Facebook scrolling, all the things that you do to feel better that actually drain your energy, but don't restore your energy. And we do them because they release dopamine. So they feel good in the short term, but they don't feel good in the long term. And so identifying those things, other energy drains, is a really beautiful thing that can come up in coaching. And there are a lot of other things that we do. Some people actually exercise as buffering. They over-exercise. That can be buffering. Sometimes we eat to buffer. Sometimes we drink to buffer. There's lots of different things that we do. And essentially, they're usually things that release dopamine or serotonin in the short term, but they don't help us, in fact, potentially cause us harm in the long term. And so anything that causes you harm is also something that drains your energy. And so when you're thinking about being less tired, if you can plug these energy holes and look at these thought patterns and begin to change them. But again, I want to go back to this idea that if you're mad at yourself about having them, then you're in shame, blame, and guilt. You're releasing your cortisol and norepinephrine. You're not going to change them. So you have to just accept that they're there. It's sort of this kindness about how you got here. Practice your mindfulness, get a little bit more replete. And then all of a sudden the change is easy. And so that's why you want to blend all this work together. It's not as simple as, oh, I see this thought pattern, I'm just going to think something different and I'm going to ream it into my head until I do. It doesn't work long-term. And so I see Anna smiling because you've tried that, right? It doesn't work. Yeah. And so I think it's really helpful to think about it, this fatigue that way. The other thing I wanted to mention, just in terms of the energy drain, and then I'll answer some questions and we'll get into more about coaching, is the words that we use. And so a lot of us say we're overwhelmed and or busy and or we have too much to do, and we describe our life that way. That description in and of itself is draining your energy and making you more tired. So I recently started to think about, well, what other words could you use? And the one that I've come up with that works for me, and it doesn't mean it'll work for you, but I would come up with a new word, is that I have a very full life. I have grandchildren. I have young adult children who are navigating things. I have a child who's going to be a senior in high school. And like, I have a husband, I have aging parents, I have a pet, I have a business. I have, all of these things. That is a full life. But if you say I'm overwhelmed, I'm so busy, I have too much to do, that thought, for those of you familiar with the thought model, creates feelings that are exhausting, that creates overwhelm, and then your energy drains. And so when I think about tools to be less tired, and this has been magical for me because I'm actually in a menopause period and having some icky menopause complications that make you tired, actually physiologically tired. So my thought is, well, I can't be any more tired. So I really have to think about how to manage my energy well. It isn't that I have to be more efficient. A lot of people who have a full life think I just have to organize it better and structure it better and have a miracle morning and all these things. It can literally be, how can you plug these energy drains? How can you conserve energy? And so when you think about, well, what drains my energy and what gives me energy, and doing more of what gives you energy and doing less of what drains your energy can make a huge difference. And the last thing I wanted to say here is that we also think that we have to fix it all at once. But if you shift 1%, 5%, subtle is significant. And I teach that in yoga for any of you that join me for yoga, little toe movements actually create these huge shifts. Little shifts in these thoughts can create space and less exhaustion. And then you can make more changes. So the subtle significant, you don't have to fix it all overnight. Little by little by little by little, things improve. And so most of us are high achievers. We're like, nope, I got to fix all these broken thought patterns tonight. And I got to stop buffering and I got to stop doing all these things. And then you're overwhelmed and it's too complicated. And so even just changing this word from I'm overwhelmed or too busy to I have a full life, that changing the one word, a tiny thing, feels so different. And so that is sort of a couple of little tools within the coaching realm that hopefully there's something in there you can try. Does anyone have questions about that?